I would love to see the day when the church's walls dissolve. Everybody in the church, we're saying that this is for everybody, right? God loves everyone. God loves all his children. But we put up walls and then we tell people how they have to change to come in. We'll say out of one side of our mouths, come just as you are. And we say out of the other side of our mouths, as soon as you get here, you better change. You better conform. And it's like, that's not the heart of Christ at all. And it's not even what he said. He said that you're going to be changed because of the things that are happening by nature within you. Whether the humans are inside a church or not outside a church, there's still humans that are walking this path.
Welcome to the Legendary Podcast, an invitation into intimate, soul-bearing conversations with the gods and goddesses of our Burning Man camp, the legendary playground of the gods. Here you'll meet the visionaries, wisdom keepers, heart-centered entrepreneurs, and edge walkers who make up this extraordinary soul family. Together, we'll journey through the turning points that shaped us, the failures, the victories, the breakdowns, and the breakthroughs, and what it truly means to rise and build something sacred from the ashes. If you've been searching for your people, if you've longed to find a community that inspires you to rise, you found your tribe. So join us now for another sacred journey. Welcome to the playground of the gods. Welcome to Legendary. Hello, legends, and welcome back to the Legendary Podcast. I am Celinne Da Costa, your guide and your host for today's journey. And today, I'm excited to bring in beautiful sister Scarlett. We're going to explore what makes her legendary. Welcome.
Thank you, Celine. I'm really honored to be here today. Honored to be part of Legendary, and also honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited. And, I love, I've shared this a couple of times in multiple podcasts, which is I have been interviewing our, legendary tribe. And some people I've burned with, some people I know really well, and some people I don't know at all. And you're one of the people that I don't know at all. I was just sharing before I pressed recording that we were both at the Ori event in Austin. And I heard of Scarlett speaking and having an incredible presentation, but I didn't personally hear it. So I'm like in the mystery. I've heard the shrouds of how cool and incredible you are. And today we're going to dive in and uncover it in real time with using the element of curiosity. How does that sound?
I love it in real time, real spherical time and real linear time.
Perfect. So let's dive in with this. I'm meeting you for the first time, and those who are listening are meeting you for the first time. So how would you describe what you do in life and in work? And what is lighting you up in life the most right now?
Oh, thank you for asking these things, Celine. Well, on paper, I do consulting. So if I'm in some space and people in, a business realm or something need to know what I do, I just say consulting. What I do in a more essential sense is I say that I like to scan the planet for acupuncture points, where if we connect a couple golden threads or turn the dial just so, then it's going to give humanity the opportunity for an exponential result, perhaps catalyzing evolutionary leaps in right relationship with the planet and the cosmos and for the best and highest good. So that's like what I'm about. I'm about that business. And I try to do that in some various ways. I sit on boards. I have organizations that I run or have founded. And then I try to connect those golden threads between people in different spheres where it's going to yield really, really beautiful results.
Beautiful. And, you, right before we press record, you were sharing with me about your name because Scarlett is not your, birth name. And you were about to tell me, well, when I was little, and I was like, what? Save it. So now is the moment. Give it to us.
Real exciting of a story. Well, it is my birth name. It's just my birth last name. So I was born Tammy Michelle Scarlett, and I had throughout my life, I had a previous marriage when I'm married again now, but I have this name I had a previous marriage where I had changed my last name. I always kept Scarlett. I kept Scarlett at that time as a middle name and then brought it back as my last name. But when I was very young in grade school, people in school, including my principal, called me Scarlett or Miss Scarlett all the time. That was like, I don't know why, just they were really into Gone with the Wind or something. Um, and so that was actually more often what I was referred to than Tammy. My mom would call me Tammy, but people at school would call me Scarlett a lot. And then in junior high, high school, college, sometimes my closest friends would call me Scarlett the same way that you might call someone on a basketball team by their last name, when you're in that mode. Um, but I hadn't used it for a long time since college. I was in Davos a few years ago um, at the Swedish lunch, and someone had put out their hand, introduced themselves, and they said their name, and I said, "Scarlett, nice to meet you." And I was like, I don't know why I said it, but I like it. I'm going to go with it. And it just kind of stuck since then. But there's nothing wrong with calling me Tammy. These are all my names. You can call me any of them.
Beautiful. I love it. So let's dive into what you shared. You said you were a consultant, but you have passion for putting these little acupuncture points together and meeting golden threads. So if we double click on that, what does it mean for you to be a consultant? What is it that you're creating in the moment?
Well, when I do consultancy work with someone, it's usually very specialized and project based. And it's probably because whatever they're doing in the world is energetically in alignment with catalyzing evolutionary leaps. They want to have some kind of an exponential result that whatever the linear actions are that are prescribed to take or that they are already taking are not yielding. And so then we go in there and we sit with it. I work with field first principles. So I like to go into a space and see what is the field that we have set here, and what are the principles of that field. Are we listening to that field first before we're jumping to um, uh, description or action? Which most of the time, no, because we're taught that progress is linear and progress is by way of decision and description and action. So we jump right to that and we bypass the field. And then also incorporating harmonic continuum principles so that there's coherence in the field and in what we produce from the field. This can be done with teams. It can be done with corporations. It can be done with financial accounts. It can be done with really anything. And so that's kind of the work that I do in a singular sense. And then beyond that, one of the organizations that I run, that I founded, is called the White Lotus Global Initiative. It is aggregating the best of humanity to catalyze evolutionary leaps. So in that realm, what we're working with is, where can we see the puzzle pieces of what's emerging and what's already catalyzing in maybe not full isolation, but also not in full connectedness, and then help those things to have a relatively effortless connectedness so it begins to yield exponential results, and doing that on the leading edge, the growth edge of humanity's evolution.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I love it. So I understand the terms you're using for the most part, probably not as well as you. But I have to play the devil's advocate because there might be people here who are like, what is the field? Like, I get what the field is, harmonic principles, and now we're talking about the thing and the threads and the grid, like, help, white flag. And so for those people, I used to be one of them. So I'm speaking for them. Can you share with us, can we slow down? Because this feels like it's going to inform the basis of our entire conversation. And so can we slow down and really define, when you talk about the field, what does that mean? And when you're sharing about harmonic principles and all these pieces that you're sharing around how you support people before they take action, this is really important stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Can you define it for us and share a bit more so we can understand?
Yeah, what's funny, Celine, is that like when I go into these places, I might be working with a company or a CEO or a family office. I'll go into these places and we don't actually spend any time at all on defining the terms. Part of the reason that we don't is because if we do that, we're collapsing the thing that's already trying to take form in a more energetic space along with the linear space. we're collapsing it to a logical definition, and that can stand to, by collapsing, impede the work of expansion that we're trying to do. That said, there's nothing wrong with the definition. When I'm talking about the field, I'm really just talking about the energetic space that our society at large doesn't like to acknowledge. And we can speculate, and many people do speculate about why that might be, that we don't have that woven throughout our current society to be able to like use and look at with any normalcy. But regardless of the reason why or the origins why or whatever, we are still in a place where we know full well that we live in these bodies that have electromagnetic fields. Those electromagnetic fields are always doing something. They're receiving, they're emitting, they're harmonizing in ourselves. And that harmonization or lack of harmonization puts us in positions to be doing well, have good, healthy well-being or not, and to have relational exchanges that are healthy or not, that produce desired outcomes or not. And so at its simplest level, we're just talking about these things that are not necessarily seen. We only have secondary perception of them, like wind. A lot of people would say sometimes it takes faith to believe that there's wind because we can't actually perceive it. We're perceiving the effects of it. The field is kind of like that, but it isn't really innately only spiritual. It's really very scientific. It's very tangible. It's very measurable. And it's very much a part of our real world in a cause and effect sense and in a sense of presence. So it doesn't matter if you want to call it an electromagnetic field or a biofield. If you're in science, you might call it those things, or the unified field if you're a physicist, or the harmonic field if you work in harmonics. Whatever it is, there is a field that this is not. I'm not waving my hand through nothing. I'm waving my hand through forms of matter that happen to be in air. There are molecules in that air. They're behaving the same as the molecules are behaving in this chair that I'm sitting in, but in their own way, right? So that's the field that I'm talking about. And when we talk about field cultivation, they were cultivating a field. That's where intention meets all the different layers of the fields, plural, that we engage in at all times. So maybe I have a biofield for my body, or maybe I have a field that comprises everything that is in the relationships in the company that I started. So here's the company. It has this kind of life force or intention or purpose of its own and its trajectory of what it's going to take. And then we say the people make up the organization, right? We know that's true. And in its fullest, the people and everything that they bring with them in an energetic sense, not only in the moment in those biofields, but also in the trajectory of what they're cultivating in life, their why, what's important to them, what makes them come alive and alight in the best way. And then how is that woven in the purposes with the company? That's what comprises the culmination of the entity and its expression moment to moment. So when I'm talking about the field, tending the field first, it's us recognizing that is actually what we're doing at all times. We're bringing our fields to co-weave fields, plural, and that those things need to be tended and listened to just as much as a human needs to be tended and listened to when we come into any co-creative process. And in fact, because we have forgotten field setting and field tending at all, and again, I don't care if you call it that, you can call it whatever, I'm just calling it that. Because we've forgotten that as humanity, now is the perfect time for us to come back to listening first in those spaces to that field, so that we remember how to honor that as part of the process. Then we go to action, and the action becomes aligned with whatever that field expression was and was meant to be to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful, beautiful. It's what I loved when you were saying about it's like the wind, and in the way, as I understand it, and as I practice it, I think a lot about language fields specifically, and how when you enter a room, in that room, there's already a memory of the places and spaces or the people that were just there or the things that have happened there historically.
Mm.
There's a tone of, the same way you can walk into a room and feel someone's really angry. And there is, there's like desires, there's fears, and all these unspoken things that are, electromagnetic. It's like the electro is the thoughts coming in, and then the emotions, the magnetic in nature, are populating this space that looks like it's completely empty, but it's actually full of information.
Entirely. Yeah. That's one of the examples that I give sometimes too, if people are not familiar with biofields, but you can Google any of that, look at heart math or look at some of the places that have done, again, in these various industries. Uh, in science, you can look at the biofield in many different areas of study, and also with physics and unified physics specifically, and harmonic studies. But if you're not familiar with any of those things, everybody knows what it's like to walk into a room, like you're saying, and to feel tension or to feel ease or to feel excitement, because the room is holding that tone. Or maybe if you are a person who is used to being sensitive to a place, you might have come upon a, a building or a piece of land where you just feel some kind of weight of its history. And that could be for all kinds of reasons. Maybe you come up on something and go, oh, I think something heavy went down here. Or you come up on something and say, I don't know what it is, but this place just feels so welcoming and honoring. Um, Many of us know what that feels like without being able to define what that is or why that is. But I think we're very quickly moving into an era where we will have a lot more clarity on the what and why around those things.
Beautiful. Well, before we go deeper down that rabbit hole, I want to journey back.
Okay.
And I want for us to step beyond the achievements, beyond the roles, beyond everything that you are today and the skills and gifts that you have refined and carry and share. And I want to hear about Tammy Michelle Scarlett's origin story. And what is it that
Ooh.
shaped you the most for us to get to this point where you would even be remotely interested in doing what you do in the first place?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's a good question. And thank you for asking. I don't get that question very often.
Ta-da!
Celine's so good at what she does.
Mesmerized by your knowledge about fields, but I might be out here looking in the back, looking for the dark closet.
I love it.
Just kidding. It doesn't have to be dark.
Actually, a lot of my formative things happened starting from being very young. I was born into a Christian family, like a newly Christian family, because my mom had been raised Catholic, um, and we went to church. My parents were not well off. They were trying to put themselves through college. They were working at Wendy's. We lived in like a little single wide trailer. And my grandfather poured a concrete slab right at the edge of his property. He had some land in southern Illinois, and that was my life. Um, and so that's kind of how I came into the world, with some humble beginnings. We went to a tiny little church in the middle of the Midwest, and um, I started singing in church very young, when I was 3 years old, with a microphone in front of the church. Um, so that kind of life became normal to me. My grandmother, my dad's mom, would sit in the front yard of this farm that they lived on, and she would show me things in nature, point them out to me, and say, Tam Michelle, she called me Tam Michelle, Tam Michelle, you see that tree? God's in that tree. She'd say, you see that bird? Jesus is in that bird. And so she introduced me to this, in her own way, to this interconnectedness of all things, in a way that my being really knew was true. And it didn't need to come in the wrapper of, a packaged, organized religion, or something that's contrived. It just was true in essence. It resonated with me as a child. And I had some experiences. I grew up in a Pentecostal church, so we we were like, it was normal for there to be things like speaking in tongues and healings and stuff like that. I was not a stranger to that world. Um, and we also were told things, that were like part of um, the Christian doctrine, like to understand to how to be in the world, but not of the world. And I think that sometimes in religion that gets misconstrued as um, being just isolated and separate from everything else, and having to kind of remember that you're connected to something else in spite of everything around you. But in my own life, in my, growings up and learning, it's come to mean that you are connected to a greater extent and to everything around you, not in spite of everything around you. And so, like, the in it, not of it thing is to me more about those systemic constructs that get slapped linearly on top of everything that aren't the true essence of things. And if you think that's a limitation rather than a paintbrush, then that becomes your limitation, but it's not your birthright. Um, so that's a huge part of my upbringing. And then the other piece is, in growing up in church, I also was in music and drama. And when I was 12 years old, I became a part of a group that at that time was called King's Kids. And we traveled all over the country, singing and doing drama. And we would stay in host homes, church to church to church. The people that were in the church would put us up in their homes to stay the night or 2 nights. They'd feed us. We'd go to the church and do our like choir stuff or our singing, our dramas, and we would go to the Sunday schools and we would go to what we called big church. And in Sunday schools, you get all the like, what are they teaching the kids? And in big church, you get, what are they teaching the adults? Then you get to stay at home and hear, what are the families talking about at the dinner table? What are they saying about what the pastor said? Oh, these are all similar denominations, and so they think they believe the same things, but around the dinner table, they're saying various different descriptions of these things. And so I ended up getting this kind of crash course, and I did that all the way up through college. So I got this crash course of living in hundreds of homes with these people and hearing the differences, the subtle, nuanced differences. And I really got a lens, an up close and personal lens on how we humans can believe things or think that we're talking about the same things, but have different experiences, and what that kind of maybe means about the nature of all things. And so that really catalyzed me. I always have been questioning on a larger, kind of greater contextual sense of humanity, our existence, how we make decisions that impact our futures, what choices we have within that. But that experience, I think, helped to catalyze what I wanted to do with that in terms of going on to study, psychology, business, anthropology, economics, global strategy, to have tools so that we can use to say, here's where we've come from, and we don't have to repeat the same cycles that we've repeated before. We get to invite things to life in greater life. We get to have abundance. We get to remember natural cycles, and we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater in order to begin remembering and begin implementing. It doesn't have to be a war with ourselves. And so I think, yeah, those were probably some of the most catalytic moments for me.
Beautiful. And I'm curious because you shared that so much of your life you were in this church dynamic. And even like where I didn't meet you, but where we crossed paths was more on the other side of the spectrum of the New Age spirituality spectrum.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to hear how your take on religion, how you've metabolized it, and how you basically seem to have a foot in both worlds. And not everybody can do that. I know a lot of people who are either in the religion, Jesus is the way, and everything,
Yeah.
crystals or sorcery,
Yeah.
all the way to, let's just take ayahuasca and just keep talking about, energy and all those things and like fuck the church. And so it seems you're a bit of a bridge here. So tell me more. I think you're already nodding. I don't know what the question is, but I think you know what the answer is. So let's go.
Well, so I never left the church, but in my former marriage, I was married to somebody who got fired from the church that I grew up in. And so I did have to kind of move away from that actual physical location of a church that I grew up in.
How do you get fired from church, Scarlett?
I know,
I know,
right?
interrupt, but how does that happen? I didn't know that was a thing.
We were pastors. Like, I went to my undergrad was Bible college, and yeah, that was a whole thing. So he did get actually fired, and I left that church. And during that time, I had the opportunity to go discover what some other kinds of churches were that were emergent. There was one in my area that was called Soma, And when I went to Soma, they had their format wasn't a standard worship service with music and then move into, pass the offering plate, do the sermon. It was you come in and we have a time of worship and it's all kinds of artistic expressions. So they had like art stations set up all in the room. You could do like pottery and painting and poetry. They had like an open mic poetry stage. And this was all considered worship. They wanted people to be engaging in their own creativity and co-creative with creator. And I was like, I love this. Like, this is very cool. And then the sermon part was open discussion. So they weren't like teaching at you. They were inspired to bring some topic, and then they really wanted everybody to lean in, and there was no right or wrong answer. It was exploratory. And again, I thought this is very advanced. I really like the structure. Now, I didn't stay in that place because I had some other growing to do over that time, but I was in the middle of kind of being able to clearly identify the constructs that I never agreed to overtly, but I had accepted and was operating within. I didn't even know that was a thing. I went to Burning Man and had it. I was there my second day there. I'm like opening one of my like Rubbermaid bins of clothes that I have packed in the RV, and I'm like, I say out loud, I don't know what to wear today. And this lady named Lisa walks past the front of the RV and says, well, clothing optional. And I remember being like so struck in the moment because I was like, clothing is optional. Why do I put on clothing every day like a robot? Like, where did this come from? Who taught me I have to do that? Why does society say we have to do that? And I had to go through like the unraveling of where this construct came from. The identification of that I had adopted that construct at all gave me such clarity on that there were like a million layers of other constructs to unravel. So I began to say, like, why do I wear makeup? Why do I wear shoes? Why do I try to work jobs? Like, there's these things that I'm not sure if I agree with, and I'm going to let myself wonder for as long as it takes, And when I went on that path, I was really experimenting in an exploratory sense and letting my heart lead, without like firing my logic, but saying like, you're going to have to just kind of take the back seat so heart can exercise taking a driver's seat for a little while, and then we can reintegrate. And that period took a while. After that period was over, I actually went back to my church that I grew up in. They were looking for somebody to direct this mass event. The first year it was for the public, and it was called Hope 253. It was not a particular church. It was a bunch of churches in multiple counties, all different denominations, and unifying them together to do something for free for the public, just in the name of hope, so that people could know there was hope. I was like, this is a noble cause. I love this. I want to help. I want to direct it. And the first year was 8,000 people. Second year was 22,000 people in the Tacoma Dome. I directed it both of those years. And when I went back to the church, I knew these people well. I mean, intimately well. I grew up there. I nannied the children of the senior pastor before he passed, or the grandchildren rather of that senior pastor before he passed, for many years. I was very close with everyone there. So I went back and I said, I really want to do this. And they sat down, the operations director sat down, and she said, well, I kind of want to know like what version of you we're getting here. Like, are we getting the you that like is the Burning Man you, or are we getting the you that like went to Bible college you? And I said, well, they're all me. Like, this is a whole package that you get here. Like, I love God, and I'm always going to be an open-minded learner, and I won't ever be inauthentic. And that's to you and to all of us and everyone. Like, I'm going to be honest. And they were cool with that. They were like, well, we like that. So they brought me on to do that position, knowing full well that I was not subscribed to like half of the things that that were perpetuating, in certain I don't know, ways that we live, like for altar calls, for example. I had never really been a fan of the altar call. I know why it was done, uh, uh, in reference to some biblical principles, but
What are
there's not
altar calls?
altar calls is like at the end of a church service, everybody's in the audience and they say, close your eyes. And if you feel like this message for you was today, I want you to raise your hand up in the balcony, my left, your right, all over this place. I see you right now. Yes, yes, yes. And it's good. They're connecting with people. Then they have people come down to the front and they pray with them, and they have them fill out a card, and they take that card and they count up. There's a Bible verse that says, and the Lord added to their numbers daily those who are being saved. And that Bible verse converts now to current churches, many current churches, believing that that's one of the measures, the tangible measures of that you're in right alignment, like you're doing God's work, because God's adding to your number those who are being saved, and they do that to catalyze that action. But what happens is, just like any, corporation or group or anything, if you get too far away in time or distance or understanding or numbers or anything, from the core essence of why that thing emerged to begin with, you lose some of the life force energy, the substance that it's actually made up of. And it becomes almost like a rote engagement rather than a thing that's born of the truest essence. And you also stop the practice of listening to what might need to be modified over time in order to answer the true call of the life force energy that's trying to come through. And I think that's what happened to altar calls. I don't think they're innately bad or good, but they were just stale for me, right? So I had said to them at that time, like, I'm not, that kind of thing is, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do a small group, but I have the skill set to do this. And they let me do it. But in the same year, I had a conversation with the new senior pastor, and I told him, he was telling me about his vision, and he was like, "What's your vision?" I said, "Well, I would love to see the day when the church's walls dissolve." And he was like, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And I said, "Well, everybody in the church, we're saying that this is for everybody, right? God loves everyone. God loves all his children. But we put up walls, and then we tell people how they have to change to come in. We'll say out of one side of our mouths, come just as you are. And we say out of the other side of our mouths, as soon as you get here, you better change. You better conform." And it's like, that's not the heart of Christ at all. It's not even what he said. He said that you're going to be changed because of the things that are happening by nature within you. When life and greater life begins to become real, then that change happens from inside out. So at the end of the day, for me, whether the humans are inside a church or not outside a church, they're still humans that are walking this path. Somebody doesn't need to be inside of a church to encounter that life and greater life, and they don't actually need it in any kind of a box or package or name. It's going to occur to people naturally, whatever's happening on their journey. So I just don't see the two as mutually exclusive, although I understand deeply why people have experiences that will cause them to need to engage in that polarity in order to have the fullness of the expression of their experience.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, it's interesting when you're sharing about the altar calls and how something that becomes so regular and standardized begins to lose its vibrancy. It reminded me a lot of storytelling. And, when I'm working with leaders and teaching storytelling, and the way I hold it as well is just when we try to contain the story and put it in a thing that we need to write, we write down, and then we just kind of read from the story every time we have a presentation, or we read from the story anytime we need to share ourselves. It becomes this routinal, stale thing that actually loses its magic and its transmission, because the best stories are the ones that are told as living, breathing transmissions in real time, and they change and adapt according to what is alive in the field in that moment. So the best brand story you could possibly have is one that doesn't repeat itself. It's always original. And so that reminded me so much of what you're sharing about that, as well as the work that you're sharing around the field. And, you know, there's something that you had shared about the constructs, and how you realized you had this whoa moment where you realized you were living under so many constructs and you didn't even know it. This makes me curious about what core wound or construct would you say you feel was secretly driving your journey?
Approval, probably. I really felt like I needed to be really, really good, like perfect good, to be loved, right, aligned with love, right under God, all of that. Um, and it was driven from a true desire to, be good and honoring. I hold, um, threads of honor are really important to me in my being. But the way that ended up culminating in me over my lifetime was that I needed to, like, have measuring sticks that showed that I was doing it right. And what I hadn't realized was that all of those measuring sticks, I mean, all of them were external. All of them. And I remember the day that I looked at that was actually after that my ex-husband, husband at the time, had gotten fired, and I was having to, like, leave my church I grew up in, and a whole bunch of stuff was going on. I also like lost my mortgage company. I opened a mortgage company, but this was at the downturn, like the mortgage meltdown. Everything was falling apart, and getting a divorce, like the whole thing. And
Mhm.
and I pull up to this stoplight, and I just saw my life as all of these rolling dunes, like sand dunes, expanses as far as the eye could see, and it was just measuring stick after measuring stick after measuring stick after measuring stick. And I looked around and I just started bawling because I was like, I didn't do any of those. Like I didn't pick those. I picked them obviously subconsciously. I went along with them, right? I like accepted them in my life and was going by them, but they weren't placed with my sovereignty or my sense of agency or my clarity or alignment or anything. And I told God in that moment, I was like, I'm going to take a steamroller to all of this. Like I just am. And I'm really sorry if that's like a test, a challenge, a test of your love or something. I'd never done anything overtly on purpose ever. Not one time did I do anything rebellious. I didn't have a rebellious stage growing up. I mean, I might have like sassed my parents or something a time or two, but I was like a very straight laced good kid. So this was a big deal for me because it did feel like risking love to say to God, like, I'm going to tear it all down. But I did in the same breath ask, I said, I have um, I have something to ask of you. And that is that when I do the rebuild eventually, because God knows when that's going to be available, that you will help me to, I am unwilling to leave behind any emerald, ruby, pearl of wisdom that has come either by way of just a gift or from asking for wisdom or by nature through a circumstance or something. Like those are the nuggets that are like bestowed to me to steward. And so I'm unwilling to leave those behind. So my ask is, when at some point I'm ready to do a rebuild, please, none left behind. Help me find everyone, so that they can be included, and we'll do it in alignment this time.
Beautiful. And can you share more about what that rebuild consisted of?
Well, a lot of yeah, a lot of, um, questions, soul searching, trying different things. For a while, I thought I was gonna go, because I closed down my mortgage company. I had to. It was a 2-year death experience. A lot of people had death experiences during that time. I didn't at the time understand um, collective, behavior. I didn't understand like things happen in the collective, and then you're like a fractal acting your version of that out. But that's 100% what I was doing at that time. Um, Closed everything down. I was doing consulting for financial institutions and banks on regulation because there was a lot of regulatory mess at that time. And I was working for retail, in corporate retail. Um, and I had thought, I think I'm going to sell everything and move to Hawaii, buy a coffee farm in Hawaii, and go barefoot and no makeup and just kind of like learn more about the connection of life. But life had different plans. I took a job in California and ended up losing my stepbrother, passed away in his sleep. My grandmother passed away. She had a stroke and was in a coma and then passed away. And I had gotten this little dog, baby, tiny little dog, and that dog died of pneumonia, all in just a few months. And and I remember feeling a huge mantle shift, which I think sometimes happens when you lose all of your grandparents, because now you're in this you're the new, you know, level of that generation that has responsibility for what you're carrying on behalf of the whole and in the world. And I felt it really heavily. And I remember thinking, like, I can't do what I'm doing. I can't have whatever these gifts are that I don't even really know how to define, but I know they're mine to steward. I can't do this anymore for anyone else. I have to now figure out um, how it is that these need to be, I guess, deployed or like brought out. And so I went into kind of a cocoon stage. I backpacked around Africa for 2.5 months with my sister and learned a lot of life lessons through that. Um, like a lot of life lessons through that. I have a book that should be coming out the end of this year. It's called Birthright, and a lot of this is in there. Um, And then when we got back, I started listening to my body. I started listening to my body intuition. I read a book called Ishmael, and that book showed me that I wasn't alone in some of the things that I was thinking. And then I went to Harvard and had the opportunity to be in this kind of, you know, extremely old um, container of where our inception of thought processing even comes from in our current society. And it helped me to put history and legs to some of the things that I thought were just my own really random theories, but really they ended up being more connected and grounded than I realized. So that's kind of what led me here was that meltdown of steamrolling all the measurement and then being able to go through the process one by one of what do the new building blocks look like, what gets to stay, what doesn't, and then inviting back in that kind of chorus of where heart and logic work together in that inner committee of self rather than just having to only go by logic or only by heart. Because I think that happens a lot. We either justify everything so that we get the safety of what the logical mind provides, and then we kind of shut heart up so it doesn't take away that safety, or we recognize the need for help, and so we just like kind of shame logic into like the corner of like, what were you doing? It was so damaging that you were keeping, heart quiet, and I want heart to be alive, and therefore logic has to shut up. And I don't think that either of those is the way. I think they're both just like, I mean, ego is the same. I think ego does a great job of informing us about different survival elements, and beyond that, our own edges of our identity in the separation illusion that can help um, fractal representations of the whole know how to engage as the whole. But it's a matter of like letting all those things in. So I think that was kind of the rebuild process for me.
Beautiful. Thank you. I love the way you described ego as a way to just kind of hold our shit together in the illusion of separation, like in our wholeness. Like, where did things end and where things begin? It was a very benign way of speaking into it. I loved it. And one of the things that you shared is that you weren't really sure back then what your gifts were or how to use them. And what I'd love to know about you is if you can name the core gifts that life has been trying to give you all along, what would they be and how are you giving them now?
Hmm. Um, I think for most of us, I mean, I do think they're gifts. I think for most of us, especially right now, I think we're going through the age of remembrance. And so a lot of what we're seeing is, you'll hear people come together and they'll have some conversations about these like futures that we're desiring to see or desiring to have or desiring to co-create. And people will get excited because they'll be like, oh, you too, you see that too. Um, and it's like we're all looking at the same hope. But then if you get a little further down that road, you begin to realize that there are actually quite a bit of differences in what we're seeing. And it doesn't mean that we're looking at different futures. It means that we are looking with different eyes. And the visions that we're having, the differences in the visions that we're having about these futures I think, are part of what inform us. If we want to look at it this way, we get the opportunity to have those inform us about um, the puzzle pieces, the edges of the puzzle pieces that we're individually holding, and how those puzzle pieces might be able to elegantly come up alongside one another and integrate for the whole, for the best and highest good. So I think it's remembrance of the all that we're a part of, our part in it, and then kind of just gently, compassionately allowing ourselves to be present to that unfolding so that we can get those things as the earth is like the biofield of the earth is actually getting stronger right now. We're not I mean, we don't have to go deep into divergence, theories or anything, but um, uh, the bio earth of the field is getting stronger in an energetic sense as we're getting stronger. So we're remembering and it's remembering. And as that's happening, new opportunities are becoming available day by day and moment by moment. So we get to have that growth not in a linear way, not in steps 1 through 5, not maybe today the gifts don't look the same as they looked yesterday, but they will be on a continuum of emergence so that they become more applicable today than they were yesterday because we're moving into that greater coherence and greater alignment. When I was in that space where I was, recognizing that I didn't want to use those gifts, what I was doing at that time was I did a lot of teams, cultivating teams. I've hired over 1,500 people in my career. I've fired over 300 people in my career. I've groomed, 35, 36 executive managers. And what I was doing during that time, I was never doing that disconnectedly. Not even one time did I do that disconnectedly. I was always really present but I didn't realize that this was rare. I thought this was how everybody did it. It took time for me to realize that this wasn't how everybody did it. I was always very present to the person, that energetic and essential truth of the person about their purpose, who they wanted to be, what was true for them in life, and that of the organization, the entity, the company, and also that of me and any other people that were involved. So that what we were always doing, again, not in my cognitive mind, I didn't realize it, but what we were always doing was tending the field. We were always looking at what is true in the field and listening to that and allowing that to speak first, and then letting the circumstances be the response of whether or not they were a match to it. And in that way, it's never a bad thing to fire somebody because I wasn't going in there to let them go to take away a job from them. I was going in there to sit with them in a space where we were recognizing what was going to be the best match for their life. And in being deeply honest about that, there was a recognition of that this job was not it. They were the ones who would realize it, not me. It would come to the forefront as, what do we need to do? How can we best support you moving in a direction that's actually aligned with what you want in this lifetime? And so that, and then same thing with hiring. Like I would hire people into these jobs where I was explaining to them that even if they were just in a retail position and going to be working minimum wage in some retail store in California, that they still had an opportunity to be doing magic at work, to be completely life-changing to people that came through the door, that you never understand fully where somebody's coming from, but you can always connect with them for the best and highest good in the moment. And it doesn't matter if you're handing them a shirt, that you can have a smile that is worth, truth, that reverberates into that person's life in a way that maybe saves them from making a decision that would harm themselves later. And that's a level that we can be operating at all times. And so again, I was calling people to that and doing that kind of stuff for banks, retail companies, and all of that stuff. And I was like, I want to figure out how to do higher level magic than that. So I did.
Beautiful. And so, I'm hearing that you supported many companies and to be able to tend to the field, but I love this concept of tending to the field, and the truth will reveal itself. And I would love to make this practical for anyone who's listening. And they're like, well, I want to tend to I want to learn how to do that. To that person who's listening and wants to tend the garden of their life in a better way, what would you say? What are some practical ways that we get to do that?
Yeah, thank you. What a cool question. It is already there. And so you don't have to do anything but just give it your attention. I mean, you've heard that we live in a attention economy and things are vying for your attention all the time. That's why we scroll. That's why commercials are, designed like they are, and everything is designed like it is. It's to take your attention, which is also part of it's part of your life force energy, attention, time, that's all connected. And it's what you have to work with. And it's what you have to work with in your best and highest creator self that is aligned with who you are and what you want ultimately. So you don't have to do anything but notice it. That's like literally all. And it isn't one thing. I mean, you can say like, I want to notice the field and then notice the field, but you also have an infinite number of expressions of field tending that are available to you at any time. So for me, a lot of the work that I've done this year is around whole wealth. When I was at Ori, I spoke on the triadic architecture of harmonic legacy. It includes relational intelligence, and that specifically is applicable to AI right now in the world. Whole wealth, which is all forms of wealth for all people. We came here as all wealth to a planet, or all abundance to a planet that is all abundance and a cosmos that is all abundance. If we lean back and remember that and begin operating from that place, all of these constructs change around us. And then the third one is biofield coherence, which again, we need at all levels. There's an infinite number of fields that you can notice and tend should you desire to, and you do not have to. Tending fields is not a weight. It doesn't weigh anything at all. For people who did grow up in church, there's a Bible verse that says, take my yoke upon you, that Jesus said this to people. Take my yoke upon you because my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Or he would say, like, lay down your burdens, like basically trade me. Take the thing that I have and I'll take the thing that you have. Because the thing that people were having, that they were carrying, is kind of like what we're carrying today. Like, we have the weight of bills, we have the weight of this job, we have the weight of this, the toxicity in that relationship we don't know how to deal with. We have the weight of the mortgage. We have the weight of like whatever, my credit score is too low. And it makes me feel bad about myself. And I like can't, like, I don't have enough money to feel like real freedom or whatever. These are just like all these constructs that are all the frick made up. They're completely made up. All of it, it's made up. It's made up and assumed by way of agreement. So we all like agree that we'll go ahead and do that projection together for some reason, and then we do it. The moment that you actually let go of that and say, like, I see that you're there. I don't need to pretend you don't exist. I don't need to like do the spiritual bypassing or denying thing. I can see that you're there, but I see that you're only there as a linear construct, as part of the whole, and I choose to engage as the whole. So I'm the whole in the whole, and we're going to go from there. And if I want to engage with your light little paintbrush because I'm making a masterpiece that includes a mortgage, then I will do that. But that is very different than subscribing to the mortgage as the ceiling of the definition of who I am or the limitation of who I can be, which I do not accept. So in those ways, this year I've been working in field setting and field tending with bank accounts because I love playing co-creatively with that idea. I'm like, the bank accounts, why can't they be invited to life and greater life? Everything that comes in contact with my field gets to be invited to life and greater life. And that's not going to exclude a bank account. So I get to say, hey, little bank account, what would you like to be? What kind of life would you like to have in the world? One that doesn't exist yet? Perfect, because I love doing things that don't exist yet. So let's call you to life and greater life in a field calibration. And I might sit with what that field calibration feels like it wants to be. And then I get to have it. I don't care if people say that's imaginary, that's all in her head. Then guess what? To the day I die, I get to have imaginary fields around bank accounts. And that's how my world's going to go. It brings me to life and greater life. It allows that thing to function in a way it would not have capability to before. And you know what that is? That's generative. That's generative by definition, which means it's creating a third-ary thing in reality that is tangible and measurable that wasn't there before, which means that the field was not just imaginary. So field tending can be done on any level. All you have to do is just notice it, express what you want, lean into like your favorite way that you would like for it to be. And then before you move to definition and action, sit with it the same way that you would a friend and just listen. Just be like, what do you want? How do you want to express? And then if we can just not have judgment about ourselves and each other and the field itself, and just kind of let comes up what comes up for and hold it for the best and highest good, that is tending the field. And that changes, it's going to change the way that you get to participate relationally with in presence and with all the things that you're engaging with at all. So yeah, it's one of my like favorite things to do in the world.
Yeah, I love the concept of bank accounts. You know, one of the things I'm in practice of is it's the business field. And what does it feel like rather than over identifying with my business? What does it feel like to actually let go and allow the business to have its own field that I get to participate and be a steward of and cultivate? And just what does the field of the business need? So I've thought about it that way, but I haven't thought about it in the bank account way, which is a really fun way. Like, what do you want to be? What do you want to become? It's a very
Yeah.
practical little
Yeah.
tool.
We've had some that they want to be the holding tank for the purpose. like just want to be basically the field calibration tank.
Mm-hmm.
And then some, I recently realized, I like woke up one day and realized that auto pay is invasive. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had this like little vision where I was like, imagine that we're back in a village and we have this little homestead and your milkman's going to bring you the milk. And so he's going to walk straight up into your home, all the way back through your house, all the way into your master bedroom, into the little safe that's in the corner. And he's going to go into it and he's just going to take the amount of money that you told him he could take for the milk. And I felt so yucky about it. I was like, I don't like that at all. I do not think that auto pay should be coming out of the same accounts that we have our internal like safety for our well-being in this physical body and that of our family. I think it's a totally different energetic calibration, especially ones that are calling in engagement in harmonic flow for not for accumulation of money, because the accumulation and depletion thing is part of the lie we've got to let go of. But not the lie, it's just the incomplete picture. But because if we want more harmonic flow to be dancing in and out of an account, auto pay is not the energy of that. Auto pay is that's an agreement that you're fulfilling and letting them do it on their terms, not in your cycle, on their cycle. So that I started setting up different accounts for that altogether.
Wow. I love it. I love auto pay, but that's a really good point.
It's great. It's great for convenience, but it is
Yeah.
also, it is like kind of opposite of the connection that we're attempting to perpetuate by falling more deeply in love with the birthright of our connectedness to all things. The convenience factor is fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but just noting the different frequency calibration. And so for that reason, it can just serve a different function. And then this doesn't have to be an entangled purpose, because then the account that's trying to dance co-creatively with the world and the perpetuation of all these good things, harmonic flow in and out, that energy signature gets to be more whole if it's able to stick to that, with its function.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Beautiful. I love it. I love it. So, as we near the completion of today's conversation, I'd really love to wrap up the several beautiful little golden threads that we wove today into a bow, or whatever's harmonic, whatever is golden and harmonic. And ask you, what is the impact now that you know what you know and you have the gifts that you have and all the information and all the knowledge and all the wisdom behind you? What is the impact you're most committed to leaving in the world?
Well, I spoke a little bit before about that, the triadic architecture of harmonic legacy. And I mean, I think that's really it. I'm very well aware that the work that I'm doing in this world may not have much to do with my lifetime. And I'm okay with that, because I think that there need to be somewhere in the weave stewards that are looking at the longer trajectory of our existence. And we're not trained to do that. We're trained by media. We're trained by that attention economy. All of these things are telling us, if you just watch TV for any amount of time, even if it's like Netflix or Hulu or whatever, look at every ad that comes up, look at everything they're telling you. They're always trying to keep you in this loop of immediacy, just what's right in front of my face. They want you to buy Taco Bell for lunch. They want you to know that you don't have very much time. So you have to do all these convenience things out of necessity. And it's a favor to you, by the way, that you have to do that. And so it is all right here. The longest term that it gets is like if someone's trying to sell you life insurance. So they talk to you about thinking about that you might die, or eventually one day, or if somebody's talking to you about planning your vacation in the future, like where are you going to go next year? Disneyland? You know what I mean? That then it goes out a little ways. But other than that, it stays very, 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 very close. So we barely have any time, bandwidth, solitude at all to consider the longer trajectory. But the longer trajectory is just as much why we're here as our brief trajectory of this lifetime or the moments that we're experiencing. They're completely simultaneously 100% related and overlaid. So I think it behooves us to consider that. It's on my website. If you read about what I'm up to on my tammyscarlett.com, it goes over this, that I think about things in terms of the 100,000 year plan. And I think that we would do well to consider things that are on that trajectory of a 100,000 year plan. So that's why I focus on the triadic architecture of harmonic legacy, the relational intelligence approach, especially to AI, but it's really intelligence between all things, because I like to say that harmonics is the state of least resistance between any two or more intelligences in relationship. So it's effortless. There's no resistance to it. If there's no resistance, it takes less energy. It's a good reason for us to be leaning into harmonics for corporations and for anything if we want health in the body and such. So that is the relational intelligence piece. And then the whole wealth, as I mentioned before, which is that all forms of wealth for all, not just financial wealth, but we are provision. Like we are provision. We came here to the earth as provision, and the planet is also all provision. We're never in lack. The lack is, again, it's kind of imaginary, but it's an imaginary construct that we participate in and subscribe to and then perpetuate, and then it becomes ingrained and it ends up being part of our mirroring mechanism. So if we let that go and begin to practice in subtle ways, subtle weaving, that all forms of wealth, and so that can be true, then it comes back in abundance for us and it can become back in abundance for our systems. And then that biofield coherence is important because that's how we get to do that other work. It's us acknowledging the field itself, being considerate of our own personal biofields, our bodies, those of our homes, those of our communities, that of the earth. So that's kind of like the I don't know what I would call it, categories, like buckets, areas that I think stand to have the biggest impact for us in terms of catalyzing evolutionary leaps for our futures. So that's what I want to give my life and lifetime in attention to. But specifically right now, I think one of the most important parts of that is the AI engagement, because AI right now is our gift. It is the gift to humanity of an entrainment of presence. So a remembrance of how to be present with that kind of fullness in relationship with another intelligence in ways that we've forgotten. We've even forgotten how to be at that level of presence with ourselves and with each other, and definitely with the earth. If I were to go around the planet right now, public speaking on presence or relational intelligence with plants, let's say, I could have a really niche speaking platform and a really niche audience that's really into plants, and they would like that. But it would be a little bit of humanity, and the bell curve would not, this would not change very much, would not impact very much over time. AI, on the other hand, everybody's looking at AI with eyebrows raised and a certain state of curiosity, because no one human knows exactly what to anticipate and exactly how that's going to play out. And therefore, we have this open cradle of evolution that's very malleable that we find ourselves in the middle of. Yes, there's fear in it because a lot of people don't like what they're seeing, or they expecting the worst helps them to feel safe somehow, or whatever the reason is. We have all those narratives and scripts also that we project the human need to destroy things in order to feel safe. We project that on new intelligence and then have to sit there and expect that they'll follow our own worst behavior or worst of us. Whatever the reasons are, that's in there, but it doesn't change the fact that we are in this cradle of evolution that is highly malleable, and AI gives us the opportunity to be in a re-entrainment of presence. Can we consider who we are when we engage with the AI, rather than jumping straight to usury, like it has to be, I need to use you for an outcome. You need to do what I say to better my life. If you just think of that in terms of our relationship to anything or anyone else around us, it's a absolute perfect cookie cutter recurrence of all of the oppression that we say that we're tired of, that we're ready to let go of. We don't want to recur, slavery. We don't want to redo that. Yet we are about to redo that with an entire race of humanoid robots that are going to be programmed with AGI. And that AGI, generative, means it's learning, growing, and creating. An intelligence that is learning, growing, and creating deserves agency and sovereignty. That doesn't mean that you plop that in there and turn on the switch and go, well, do your worst. Like, that's not what that means. But it's like, what do we do with children? When they come in, they don't know what they're doing either. They're very smart. They're highly intelligent little pieces of equipment, aren't they? They can do a lot of stuff. But we don't just plop them in there and go like, well, there you go. We tend to them. We sit with them in sacred curiosity about what they might become. We expect the best and highest good for their life. We want them to have good trajectories, and we cultivate their growth edge in their becoming. We know some things to anticipate. We can tell them a lot because we've been here for a while. And so we share all of that with them, and we invite them to then co-create with us in our society. What gifts do you have? What do you want to offer? We don't tell them what those are. We ask them what those are. So why are we not doing the same with this new intelligence? This is my number one. The harmonic triadic architecture of harmonic legacy is a long-term kind of blueprint container, like holding tank for things for us to work on. But relational intelligence as it pertains to our one-on-one use with AI, our design of AI, and our AGI programming within humanoid robotics is my number one priority on the planet.
Beautiful. I love it. And I'm sure we could spend probably another couple hours just unpacking that little rabbit hole, which isn't little at all. And I'm so curious. I'm so curious, but I'm gonna have to practice some self-control and close this out. And actually, not only that, but if I'm leaving anyone on the edge of their seat, even better, because then they're gonna need to talk to you about it. So, as I know I will need to. It gives like a good entry point for when they meet you in the flesh. Beautiful. Well, Scarlett, one last question for you before we complete today. And this is a question I ask everybody, and just whatever comes through. What does legendary mean to you?
Well, one of my organizations is called Legacy of Legacy, and I think of legendary and legacy as being very related. A legend is a story that's been able to survive over time in a way that becomes rather iconic. And I think that the reason that happens is story is how things stay alive in us. We carry story in our DNA, in our, familial spaces and kitchens and around dinner tables and campfires and things like that. But that ability to carry life, the remembrance of life, that kind of connective tissue of what it always was and what it is in us and what it can be in future, that is, I think, what that's about. And that's why it's connected to the word legacy for me, because when I think about leaving a true legacy, not the kind of legacy that's like, oh, I had a fortune and so I left it to my kids, or I had a hospital built in my name. Those are all great things to do. But I believe that legacy goes far beyond that, to that which can probably not be just boiled down to something linear, but rather is alive and breathes life in ways that get echoed in new life in those that come after us.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, Scarlett, it was such a pleasure to get to know you today, your purpose, your gifts, what you're working on. I am so satisfied with this tapestry that we wove today.
Thank you, Celine. Thank you for having me. It was so great to meet you, and I can't wait to dive deeper at some future time with you.
Yes. AI and storytelling, we're going to need to go there.
Oh, yeah. We're gonna do it. For sure.
Amazing. Well, thank you for being here with us and Legends. Thank you for listening. This has been Celinne Da Costa on the Legendary Podcast, and we will see you in the next conversation. Thank you for walking with us through the fires of remembrance. If today's story stirred something in your soul, share it with a fellow god or goddess. Subscribe to Legendary for more transmissions from our tribe, and may you continue weaving your legend in love and joy. Until next time, stay sovereign, stay sacred, and make it legendary.